In my last video on identity, I showed you how an event becomes a belief and how a belief becomes an identity and how that identity runs your life whether you choose it or not. And a lot of people watched that and said, okay, I get it. I need to build my identity on purpose. But here's what I didn't show you. Identity isn't one flat thing. It has an inside. It has a sequence. It has an engine that most people have never seen. And that engine is the reason some people build something real and some people stay stuck planning forever. That's what this video is about. Most people, when they decide to get serious about identity, do one thing. They name it. I'm a hard worker. I'm someone who tells the truth. I'm disciplined. I'm a person of integrity. And then they wait for their life to reflect that. It doesn't work like that. And they can't figure out why. Well, here's why. The name is the beginning of the work. It's not the end of the work. Identity has depth. And until you go inside it and build what's actually there, the name is still just a label with nothing behind it. What I want to show you today is what's inside identity, the sequence that makes it actually function. Because once you see this, the way your decisions get made, the reason you stall, the reason clarity never seems to come when you need it, all of it starts making sense. So here's the sequence. You have characteristics, values, function, decision, trajectory, and clarity. 6 things. And they move in order. You can't skip one and expect the next one to hold. Let me walk you through each one. Characteristics are the qualities of an identity. They're not behaviors, they're not moods. They're the defining characteristics of a specific kind of person. Honest, loyal, courageous, disciplined, reliable, self-controlled, hardworking. Those aren't random virtues on a motivational poster. They're descriptions. They answer one question. What does this person actually look like in real life? Not in theory and not when it's easy, when it costs something. What would you observe about this person? Now here's something I've watched up close for over 30 years working with people. Pay attention to how people describe themselves because there's a pattern, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. The people who are genuinely honest, they never tell you they're honest. It doesn't come up, it doesn't need to. The characteristic is visible, it's with them in the room. But the people who say things like, I'm the type of person who is honest, watch them closely. That phrasing, I'm the type of person who, whatever, it's almost like they're selling themselves on the idea in real time. And in my experience, it's the surest sign that they are not the type of person that they're claiming to be. My grandmother used to say, when you're a lion, you don't have to roar because you're the king. A character isn't something you announce, it's something that you are. And until it's that, until it's just what you do without thinking about it, it's just a goal, not a characteristic. That's what you're building toward. Now, once you have your characteristics, they're going to collide because life doesn't provide you with easy choices between good and bad. Life presents you with choices between 2 things that are both good. And only one of them can win in the moment. Like truth or kindness, honesty or protection, your standard or the relationship. That collision is where values lives. Values are rankings. They answer one question. When 2 things I believe in collide directly, which one am I going to choose? I used to ask parents, what's more important to you, telling the truth or being nice? I thought the answer was going to be obvious, but it was about 50-50. And those parents weren't wrong exactly, but when those 2 things walk directly into each other, which one's going to win? Have you decided that in advance, or are you going to figure it out in a moment? Because if you figure it out in a moment, fear will probably decide. Comfort may decide. Whoever has the most social pressure in the room decides, and none of those are you. Now, a commenter shared something this week that I want to bring in here because it takes this to another level entirely. He was in a Bible study. The discussion was about honesty, and someone raised this scenario. A woman is hiding a family of Jews in her home. The Nazis are going house to house. They knock on her door. Now, she has a value, honesty above all else, because she's a Christian and she won't lie. She tells the truth. Her family and the people she's protecting, all of them, they're taken to a concentration camp. The question the group raised was this: in a matter of life and death of someone you're protecting, is honesty still the highest value, or does saving lives sit above it? That's not a hypothetical exercise. That's values meeting reality at maximum pressure. And what it exposes is this: a value without a governing authority above it, like God, is incomplete. It will eventually reach a situation it can't handle. That woman's value of honesty was real, but if God is above honesty, and the question becomes, what would God have her do in that moment? The answer may be different. Rahab hid the spies and lied to protect them. Scripture doesn't condemn her for it, it commends her faith. This is why the identity stack matters. Values don't sit in a vacuum, they sit under something. And whatever sits at the top of your stack is what governs the collision when the stakes are as high as they go. If your values aren't ordered under something higher than the values themselves, you'll eventually hit a moment that breaks them. Now, here's the part that changes everything, and most people skip it entirely. Before you lock in your values, you have to ask one question about each one. What is the function of this value in real life? Not how it feels or not whether it sounds right. What does it actually produce? What's the function of truth? What's the function of lying? What's the function of a good attitude? What's the function of complaining? What's the function of self-reliance or dependency or reading? What's the function of handing yourself a scream every time you have a free moment? Every one of those questions has a real answer, and the answers are not equal. Truth builds trust, coherence, courage, and a self that can stand up to scrutiny. Lying builds fragmentation, fear of exposure, and a version of yourself you have to keep managing. A good attitude builds endurance, steadiness, and the kind of inner strength that compounds over years. Complaining builds a lens, and once that lens is in place, everything gets filtered through it. Self-reliance builds agency, capability, and strength. Dependency builds helplessness that gets harder to reverse the longer it runs. Those aren't moral opinions, they're functional outcomes. They're what each value actually constructs over time. This is why function has to become it has to come before you finalize your rankings. Without understanding what each value produces, you're picking based on preference, not architecture. And a life built on preference instead of function will hold up fine, right up until it doesn't. Function is the great clarifier. Use it before you commit. Now we get to the part where most people fail. Not because they're not intelligent, not because they lack information, but because they never actually decide. Here's something worth knowing about that word. Decide comes from the Latin decidere. De meaning cut off, meaning off, and sedere meaning to cut. It's the same root as incision, scissors, cesarean. To decide is not to express a preference. It's not to lean towards something or feel good about a direction. To decide is to cut, to sever the alternatives, to remove the other options from the table and move. That's what makes a real decision so hard. It involves loss. It eliminates possibilities. It ends the comparison. It commits you to a direction before you have every variable accounted for. And most people, when they get close to that moment, they pull back because the research felt like progress. The planning felt like movement. The comparison felt productive, but it wasn't. I've watched this pattern destroy more good ideas than I can count. A talented person has something real, a good idea, genuinely good. They share it with a trusted friend. They get some good feedback. They share it with someone else. Helpful suggestion, and they adjust slightly. Then 10 more people weigh in. Each one offers something useful. Each one shifts the idea by 1 or 2%. 6 months later, the original idea is unrecognizable. Nothing has been built, nothing has been tested, and eventually the talented person gives up because nothing worked. But nothing worked because nothing was ever actually attempted. More input doesn't always create more clarity. Sometimes it creates erosion. That's not how collaboration works. That's surrender to influence wearing the mask of open-mindedness. Now here's the other side of that same coin, and I'm speaking from personal experience on this one. I have had people offer suggestions about how I should run my business. You should do this, you should do that, you should consider this other thing. And genuinely, I appreciate that they care enough to say something. But here's what I always come back to. Do you know who actually has to execute those suggestions? Me, not the person making the suggestions, just me. So I weigh the juice against the squeeze, which is the effort and time required against the reward on the other side. And most of the time, I decide to not take the suggestion, which offends people. And I'll be honest, I feel bad about that for about 2 seconds, and then it passes. Here's what doesn't get said enough about decisive people. We're not trying to offend anyone. But when you know who you are and what you're building, you can receive input without being governed by it. You can hear the suggestion, weigh it honestly, cut it off if it doesn't fit, and keep moving. That's not arrogance. That's a built identity doing its job. A clear identity protects movement from endless modification. It lets input in without letting input take over. It says, this is who I am, this stays, this goes, this is what I do and what I don't do. But at some point for all of us, the input has to stop and the cut has to happen. A real decision sounds like this. I will not do that anymore. I will tell the truth even when it costs me. I will be this kind of person. One cut and then something starts. Now I want to show you something before we go any further. This right here, it's called a pivot point. This is a pivot point right here. One decision is one hand is the decision, the other is the fork in the road, but it kind of teeters back and forth. Two directions, both of them are real, both of them leading somewhere completely different. Excuse me. Whichever road you take, that becomes your trajectory. And I don't want to just explain that to you. I want to show you what it looks like from inside a real moment. Because I've stood at that fork and I've had no idea where either road was actually going to end up. Now, I grew up in Mississippi. I had 2 martial arts schools and neither one of them was making real money. I was fed up. I was done. I told my wife, I think I'm finished with martial arts as a business. I'm going to join the military. My goal was to become a Navy SEAL. But I took some students to a tournament, and on our way out, a very successful martial arts school owner chased me down in the parking lot and offered me a job in Texas. Now I'm standing at a fork in the road. Keeping my 2 schools wasn't an option. That was already decided. So the pivot point was clear. Move to Texas or join the military. 2 completely different directions for my life. 2 completely different lives on the other side of that choice. Now, he offered to fly me and my wife out so we could come see the school and hear the full offer. I didn't want to go. I just wanted to get to the recruiter and get started. My wife told me, let's at least go to Texas and see what was on the table. So I called some school owner friends of mine and asked, what should I ask for in salary? They gave me a number. I told my wife I was going to double it because there was no way he was going to pay what I asked him to. So we'd go to Texas. He'd say no. We'd come home and I'd join the military clean. But when I sat down across from him and gave him my salary, he stuck out his hand and said, "Done. How quick can you get here?" Now, I found out later that he and his partner were making exactly that amount. The moment I walked out the door, they gave themselves a raise just so they could make more than me. I moved to Texas. And here's what I want you to understand about that moment. Standing in that parking lot after a tournament, I could not see where that fork led. I thought I knew. I was certain I was going to go home and enlist. The trajectory I actually started that day led to working for one of the most successful martial arts business owners in the world, learning how to run a school correctly from the inside, and eventually opened my own school in Texas. 30 plus years later, I'm still here. I didn't see any of that from that fork. I couldn't have. That's how a trajectory works. You don't see where the road goes from the pivot point. You only see it after you've been walking it long enough for it to show you. That's why decision matters so much. You're not choosing a destination, you're choosing a direction. And direction lived out, compounded over time, becomes a life. Both roads lead somewhere. Make sure you're the one choosing which road you take. Now here's the one thing that's going to challenge you, it's going to challenge most of you. Clarity is not where you start. Clarity is what you get after you move. Most people have it completely backwards. They think they need full clarity before they can decide. They want certainty before commitment. They want all the variables known, all the questions answered, all the risk removed before they take a single step. So they keep planning, they keep researching, they keep gathering input, they keep refining the idea, and they never move or do anything. But here's the truth. You can't get the information you need by standing still. You don't know all the questions yet. You don't know what reality will reveal until you enter it. You don't know which assumptions are going to collapse until you test them. Movement reveals it. I'll tell you what the Texas decision revealed about me because I didn't see it coming. I moved there thinking I wanted to fight. I love combat. That's what I thought I was. A fighter who happened to teach martial arts to pay the bills. Teaching was the vehicle. Fighting was the point of the whole thing. What the trajectory showed me over years from the inside is that what I actually am is a teacher, not someone who teaches because it funds the fighting, someone who is genuinely built to shape other people. To watch someone walk in is one thing and walk out is something more. That's the thing that actually moves me. I didn't go to Texas to learn that. I went to Texas because a man offered me more money than I thought he would. But the road showed me something the fork never could have. That's what clarity does. It doesn't just confirm what you already suspected. Sometimes it tells you something about yourself that you didn't go looking for. Something truer than what you would have invented if you tried to figure it out just by standing still. And here's what I want you to sit with. You don't get that from planning. You don't get it from more research or another opinion or better framework on paper. You get it from moving, from cutting, from choosing a direction and walking it long enough for it to show you what's actually there. So here's the whole sequence laid out simply. Characteristics give your identity its quality, which are the specific traits of a specific kind of person. Values rank those qualities so you know which one wins when they collide. Function tells you whether those rankings are built on something real or just something that sounds good. Decision cuts the alternatives and starts movement. Trajectory is the direction that movement creates. And clarity is what reality hands you once you're actually inside of it. You don't get to the end of the chain by thinking harder. You get there by moving. And most people never get there. They name the identity and stop. They add characteristics to a list and never rank them. They pick values based on feelings and never test them against function. They plan endlessly and never decide. They wait for clarity before moving and wonder why nothing ever changes. That's not a character flaw, that's a missing framework. And now you have it. The only question left is the one only you can answer. What are you going to do with it? Subscribe and share it with a friend if it helped you see things differently or more clearly about identity. Believe it or not, this is the second link in what I call the framework. The framework is a diagnostic to help you decide where the real problems are in your life. It goes like this: belief, identity, standards, discipline, behavior, outcomes. Until next time, I'm Scott Wilkinson.